On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Karim Fanous. He is the VP of Engineering at strongDM. We're going to be talking about some of the challenges that go into scaling your engineering team. I know it's a wide topic. We're going to kind of focus on, some of the productivity components. We're going to try to get the effects on people that's kind of tied back into productivity. Karim has a great article that I will link to this topic. Karim, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Amir. Excited to be here.
Awesome. Let's start off at the top. Let's tell everyone what strongDM does, and then what are some of your responsibilities as the VP of Engineering?
Sure. So strongDM is an infrastructure access platform, which is basically software that allows members of technical staff, software engineers, data scientists to access resources that they might need to on a day-to-day basis. Servers, Kubernetes clusters, databases, and we do it securely with no secrets or no passwords on your endpoints or on your machines.
Awesome. And as the VP of Engineering, what are some of the responsibilities that falls to you?
So I'm obviously responsible for building the product or delivering the roadmap, but there are other responsibilities that fall into that. We're a SaaS company, so we host and manage infrastructure that powers the software. That falls also under my team. And last but not least, because our audience tends to be highly technical, we have extensive technical documentation about how to use the product, APIs, SDKs. So I'm also responsible for technical docs.
Awesome. All right, let's dive into it. Thanks for the overview. I guess we're going to be talking about scaling engineering teams, and I guess I guess I'm going to reference the article on your blog post about it actually will slow you down. So got to slow down to speed up. And I guess, when we're talking about scaling an engineering team, we're talking really about productivity, people, process. We're going to kind of focus on productivity up front, see how far we get. I guess when you're looking at the idea of scaling up or scaling the engineering team, obviously it's in a response to the business. There's obviously distinct goals you're trying to achieve. When you're starting to think about, I guess, just time frame of scaling, like, you obviously going, let's say, from Series A to Series B or whatever series you might be going, you got to have some kind of distinct time frame or some kind of frame of reference of what that period's going to look like. How do you start evaluating what that short or long or medium term time looks like?
That's a great question. The timeline that I'm usually operating under is anywhere from 12 to 18 months. But it's helpful to also anchor that into what does scaling mean. I mean, you might be a team of 100. Do you want to double or triple? Usually, the first time you scale an engineering team in a startup is around the Series A leading into the B. You might have some reasonable confidence, or you might have evidence of product market fit, and you're trying to grow the engineering team and probably other orgs or other functions within the company as well. And at that early stage, it is not unusual for an engineering team to be around, under 20, sometimes even smaller than that. And the first scaling element is usually taking that and then doubling it, trying to double that. So the time horizon to do all of those machinations tends to be 12 months or so.
Obviously, I guess both those components tie into if you're looking to double, every 12 months potentially, that does seem like a certain amount of overhead to you, the team. Obviously, you're planning. When you're envisioning that period of time where we're going, let's say, from 10 to 20, from 50 to 100. And actually, as you're kind of increasing, it's not maybe a corresponding scaling, based on the team's effort. But when you're looking at what the team has to go through, they're delivering. It's a startup. You guys are focused about run rate, delivery product, and now we're focused on, hey, we have to interview, we have to put resources into it. How do you factor, that potential overhead, that tax on the team, to their roadmap, which is obviously tied back into your, let's say, your 12-month roadmap of wanting to double the team?
Yeah. So the first thing you need to do as an engineering leader is relay those concerns to the rest of the business. If the rest of the business is making assumptions that, hey, we're going to grow from 10 to 20 in 12 months, and therefore we're going to deliver 2x the roadmap, I think that is going to be setting the engineering team and the rest of the company up for a nasty surprise. So you have to relay that this is a deliberate and lengthy effort, and the results of which will allow the team to operate and deliver more, but not immediately. Okay. The back of the envelope, and I wish there was, some productivity or scientific way to measure the impact of doing all this hiring. But like, if you want a finger in the wind sort of estimate, is whatever you used to do before you're doubling your team from 10 to 20, it's probably what you're going to be doing while you're hiring those engineers as well, or doing that initial step up function. So if you want a reasonable proxy, look back to what you were able to attain last year and go like, well, we delivered 3 big things, and maybe this year we'll be able to get 3 as well. And we'll build the team so that next year we can shoot to get 5 or 6 or whatever your aspirations are. But this year, you're probably going to be on par to what you're able to do prior to scale.
Absolutely. I guess to kind of maybe talk about that, I guess the overhead, there is the time overhead component. Your team has to spend interviewing, collecting feedback, being involved in that process. There's also got, some kind of context switching we're talking about, because obviously as someone is going from this meeting where they're interviewing somebody and drilling them about their code or their background for an hour, and then they have to switch and go back to development, there's a little bit of loss of productivity. Have you seen, I guess let's first talk about the context switching. Like when you see that and your team has to do it, how do you try to structure their days to kind of take advantage of, reducing that context switching? Or is it, listen, it's part of the territory, we just have to deal with it?
Yeah, it definitely is a huge part of that, the impact. So not only do you have to spend the time to recruit and interview and debrief on those candidates, but going back to your day job is not going to happen, like that. It takes time to go back to software development and what you were doing prior to the interview. So I've tried a few things. We've tried to have fixed slots, so that you're going to be interrupted on Friday afternoon. Okay, and therefore mentally you can prepare for that, and it also makes scheduling from a recruiting perspective somewhat simpler, so that they don't have to bug you 15 times to find out when is a good time for you to do an interview. I've also found the extreme where we would have, on a rolling basis, engineers who do nothing for more than 1 day per week but interview. But again, that is meant to shield either parts of their schedule or part of the team to say, like, we're going to take a 25% hit, and that hit is going to be targeted to those individuals, or at least that chunk of a work day. And you can try and experiment to which one works best for you, but ultimately I found it very, very helpful to carve out a dedicated portion of time for your engineers to conduct these interviews, for them to get back into the mood of, or the mode of working, and also for your recruiting team to be able to do the scheduling and interfacing easier with the engineers.
I guess from that basis, I guess the relationship with the recruiting team and your team, obviously engineering time is pretty expensive because it's taking away from delivery. Recruiting obviously has their own metrics. They want the roles filled. I mean, there's time to fill. There's a ton of different metrics they're working with. How do you? Well, what's the relationship with the recruiting so they are aware of the dynamic of what your team is responsible for, but yet obviously you guys are working on a joint project to hiring more people?
Yeah, I think that's the key word. This is a joint relationship. So their success is my success. And ultimately, the team, the engineering team as well, needs to understand that the effort that we're putting in there, time and whatever, is in the best interest of the team. So yes, we're taking time away from active software development, but we're building a team for the long term. So the first thing, you want to make sure that everyone is aligned on what we're really trying to do, and they're not 2 teams, it's 1 team. And ultimately, the metrics that we all care about aren't time to hire. Well, it's important, but did we make the hires we wanted to, and are they the right hires? Sometimes that might mean you will have to interview 10, 20, 30 candidates to land and triangulate on the right one. And sometimes you get lucky and the first, 3 or 4 are the right ones. But you want to err on the side of hiring the right candidates for your role and your company versus just, doing it metrics driven.
Absolutely. When you're looking at that right person, and obviously you could find the person, the very first candidate that comes through, it could be the 50th. I mean, who knows as you're going through the process. As you're envisioning the team and you're thinking through the 12 months and you're thinking, okay, well, I'm going to double my team. I'm going to need different types of people joining. Are you and the team, are you guys kind of slightly refactoring based on each hire? Go, hey, listen, we covered this role. We will need a manager. Let's kind of, tweak this particular hire to maybe have a little bit more management aptitude. Obviously, it might extend the time to hire. But again, depending on what you're looking to fill, are you thinking that far forward while you're trying to potentially fill that doubling of the headcount?
Yeah, you absolutely have to. So there's I think 2 parts to your question that are pretty important. The first one is you need to have a repeatable and objective process to be able to hire all those engineers. Meaning, and you first start by what is the archetype or profile that you're looking for, and you help your recruiting team find that. And it could be as simple as, hey, we're looking for backend engineers proficient in, I don't know, Java or Go or whatever your languages are. Or we're looking for front-end engineers proficient in React. But you have to define what that archetype looks like. And you also have to define what good looks like so that your interviewers know how to objectively assess and evaluate a candidate. Okay. The second part is that archetype is going to evolve. You might want to hire, I don't know, a handful of staff level software developers and later on decide, you know what, we can tweak it and get some engineers with 5 years of experience. You might also modify it and say, if we hire 7, 8, 9, or however many software developers, then we need to be hiring an engineering manager as well to make sure that the team is well balanced. So you're trying to lay out a plan, and that plan should tackle how many do you want, what profiles, and the profiles could be varying degrees of experience along the typical software engineering ladder, as well as managers and maybe other roles, SREs, DevOps. There's lots of different roles beyond just active software development. So all of that needs to be part of, all right, when we double, it can't just be software engineers writing code.
I guess as you're hiring people, and let's say you did have 10 people for an example, and you have the archetype, we know the profile we're looking for. How often do you go back to that, the ideal 10 that you're looking to hire, let's say for engineering, and start refining out different profiles based on, you've gone through 8 hires and now you have the final 2, and let's say now you can dial in a little bit more specific context for that type of person, because obviously now the other 8, so you might be able to take advantage of some deficiencies. Or do you go back and revisit the plan pretty frequently? Is it still, hey, I got the plan, I'm just sticking to it because I know I'm going to double potentially 12 months out, so I can't really put too much more attention to it?
You always have to go back and revisit, especially as you are able to attract and start those initial hires, because you learn. Some of the assumptions that you made might be completely incorrect. You'll also learn what the team needs. So say you've hired the first 3 or 4 new members of your team, and those are going to introduce a new dynamic, and those are going to introduce some new data points that you might not be aware of. Maybe you need to hire a software developer, and you didn't take this into consideration. Maybe the roadmap is going to change, and that poses some new requirements for you. So I don't think it's as extreme as every few weeks you're going to tear up that whole plan, but you need to be aware and keeping your eye on what the team needs and what the business needs as well, and whether what you have in mind and what you're prosecuting plan-wise is aligned with those 2 outcomes.
Absolutely. I guess, we've been talking about the hiring part, and obviously there's a productivity impact going through that whole process. The flip reverse of that is you've gone through the hiring, now you've added people to the team, and there's yet another overhead through the onboarding. Obviously, there's other teams that do bring some of that together, getting them in, filling out HR systems, all that stuff's fine. But then the actual getting them productive, somebody on the team has to be responsible for some of that. Again, that's a little bit more overhead, potential context switching. I guess maybe talk a little bit about the after the hire part of this and your onboarding and the productivity hit.
Yeah, that's where the fun starts. And actually, that's where the hard work starts. As much as hiring is challenging, it really is like once you hire someone, the more interesting challenges start. And you've got someone in through the door, you want to keep them, you want to retain them, you want to get them to be as productive as quickly as possible. And that takes time. Not only does it take time, but remember that example that we were talking about. You have 10 people who've been in the company for some period of time and some new people trickling in over the next 12 months. So you end up with 20 people, a mix of tenured and new. Well, when you're onboarding, all of the context and information that you need to distill to the new hires are in the brains of the quote unquote, the original 10, who are also busy interviewing. Okay. So they get, the double whammy. They get the task of doing most of the interviewing, and also, congrats, we've hired, Bob and Sally. Now go and work with them to give them all the information that they need to do. They need to have to become really good at what they're going to be doing here. And again, that takes time. So one of the things that I try to do when coming up with a hiring plan, the reason I said it's usually, at least a year to begin with, is you want to space those hires out. Okay? Because you want to give the existing team, the ability to absorb new hires and get them up to speed, onboard them, spend time with them, versus Amir joined, here's a laptop, here's our GitHub repo, good luck. Right? You want to spend time working with Amir, and I'm using you, sorry, as an example here, but all those new hires on a project, working together, collaborating, deep work. And that takes time, which is why you want to spread the hires you're onboarding through the year, especially with a small team, because you don't have enough resources to be able to digest and onboard 30 people if you're a very small team.
Absolutely. I guess, that's the question that comes to my mind is, so I know you're spacing out to allow for hiring. So obviously the team's still interviewing incrementally through the year. They're onboarding people. People are becoming more productive. The year's going to go by, potentially more funding. You're going to try to double again. The cycle keeps going, which is good. That's what a startup wants. I guess when it comes to, you mentioned deep work, engineers want to hunker down, quote unquote. You can't see my quotes, but hunker down and get to work and code. How do you space out that, that ability as you space out the hiring to make sure that deep work can really get accomplished, knowing that, again, you're probably going to go through this potentially, and now, well, your original 10 is now 20, which is going to help, but nonetheless, you might be hiring 20 more, which maybe doesn't help.
Yeah, because the cycle never ends. So the first time you do that, it's hard, okay? Because most of the impact is going to fall on the original 10 for the first 12 months. Now, if you're doing a good job and trying to get the new people that you've hired up to speed fairly quickly, that means not only are they coding, but they understand what are the values and attributes we care about as an engineering team. How do we interview people? And how do we onboard new hires as well? At the end of year one, your team now is 20. You can spread the load of trying to get another 20, not on the original 10 that you had, but on the entire team. So the impact is going to be relative is going to be the same, because you're trying to double and it doesn't really matter on the base of 20. But rather than all of that burden falling on, the earliest 10 engineers, you're trying to spread the load. Okay. The next time you do it. But regardless, anytime you're trying to double an engineering team, regardless of what the baseline is, it is hard. Whether it's 100 going to 200, one going to two is fairly easy. But that doubling period or that doubling goal is pretty hard to do.
Absolutely. I guess we've kind of been touching a little bit on, obviously we're hiring people, we're hiring, in this continuous process that's going to be ongoing. We've been talking about in terms of your team, obviously getting strained. You're paying attention to make sure people are productive. Making sure that people don't feel burned out, that they have some time. I mean, how do you monitor that? Because obviously that is a risk. Because obviously, multiple parts happening, constant, dynamic activity. Like, how do you monitor that mental health side of it?
Yeah. So there's two, probably more, but there's two tools that I can think of now, and I've used quite extensively. The first one is just your one-on-ones. Okay, that is a really, really good way to find out is your team healthy, and that spans tenured engineers, folks that just walked in through the door. That is a really, really, really good tool as a manager to use to try and understand, is your team healthy? The second is for every new hire we get, we have an explicit, a very well-defined onboarding. We call it a scorecard. It's self-assessment. You fill it out. Okay. In that, so when I have a conversation with someone who's been here for a week or 2 or 3 months, that onboarding sheet spreads over the first 90 days. They can reflect and say, you know what, I'm struggling here, or I need help in this particular area. So this is another data point to help you understand whether someone new is struggling. And the third one is just these holistics. We have a wellness survey that we conduct on a regular basis here. And that covers, it's much broader than simply like the health of a team or an individual, but it gives you very good signals on, is the team happy? Are they motivated? Are there areas that they're struggling in? What can we do as a management team to help remedy some of the challenges the teams are saying? So I think the combination of just one-on-ones, your structured onboarding process, and then some of the programs that your people team might be running, like wellness surveys, ought to give you a good pulse on what's happening to the team. Another last one, is retention. Okay. So if you hire 10 and lose 7, you're doing something dramatically wrong, right? That's a clear signal that something's bad.
Yeah, that's, what's funny is, within the context, obviously, at the moment we're recording this, hiring for some has slowed, hiring for some has not slowed. It's all up in the air. 6 months, a year ago, hiring was at a frenetic pace, and, losing people was almost worse than hiring because just then you have to go back and backfill. When you're looking at retention, I mean, you're talking about those one-on-ones, and obviously you want to make sure your team is invested, they're happy, they feel like their needs are being met. How are you balancing as the VP of engineering, making sure that you're seeing that you have your plan, you're not losing the trees to the forest type of thing?
Awesome question. So when a team is relatively small, you can sort of see that because you have direct contact with the entire team. It becomes very challenging if you don't have a management structure in place. So let's say you're the only VP, you're the only manager on the team, and you're 10, and all of a sudden you became 25, and you're still the only manager on the team. That is a hard spot to be in, and I've lived that numerous times because you start losing that direct pulse with the team. You can't have 25 or 30 meaningful one-on-ones in, 1 or 2 weeks. Okay. So if that was your only mechanism to maintain that semblance of, is the team healthy, happy, motivated, you will start losing that unless you start thinking about other either you grow managers and leads from within the team or you hire, but you have to plan for it because it is very important to make sure that as you're growing, your team is healthy and not feeling, they will feel it, the tensions and the pains of growing up, but at least they have a relay or a way to go and talk and express some of these concerns, and obviously for someone to help them navigate them and tackle them, whether individually or systemically across the team.
Awesome dialogue. I think some great insights. This is such a critical part of hiring. It's more art than science, I like to say, because you're balancing people and their pressures are light. Thanks for coming on and sharing. I was going to ask you. There's a couple of questions I'd like to cover. One is, if you had an opportunity to ask a future guest a single question or have them cover a specific topic, what would you like them to cover?
This is a one that I thought of. What do you do in your first 90 days on any new job? And maybe scope it to your new VP of engineering or leadership position engineering. What do you focus on in your first 90 days, and how do you find this out?
Awesome. Secondly, if somebody wants to reach out to you and pick your brain on anything you mentioned, what's a good way of getting in contact with you? LinkedIn, Twitter, email?
LinkedIn is fine. My email is Karim, so that's my first name, Karim, at strongdm.com. I'm on Twitter. I don't use it that much. So LinkedIn, I think you have that in the bio I sent. And I also have my newsletter. You can ping me there as well, but email as well works.
Okay, awesome. We'll make sure we include those in the show notes. Again, thanks for being on. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you, Amir. This was fun.
Thank you, Karim. All right, that's it for this episode. We'll be back again, different guests, different topic. Until then, I ask for two things. One, if you found the podcast useful, please share it. That's how the podcast grows, and everyone who shares it, I appreciate it. I don't know you individually, but I do thank you if you are sharing it. Secondly, if you know someone or you yourself want to talk about those first 90 days joining in an engineering leadership position, and what you do and how do you go about making sure not only are you doing what you're supposed to be doing, but also assimilating to the team, I'd love to have you on. I think that'd be a great topic. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.